Today's first reading from the prophecy of Habakkuk resembles in a way, amazingly, our present time. Habakkuk speaks of the violence, the destruction, the strife, and the misery that's happening to Israel 600 years before Christ. And the central idea of it is that because they've abandoned faith in a loving God, now they are suffering. And the question comes to us, are we suffering today in our country because we have abandoned, in a way, the faith in a loving God? Habakkuk talks about that faith, the just man will live by faith. And this faith he talks about is a trust in a kind God. Is a confidence in a merciful God. It is a surrender to a loving God. And of course, this will bring about a strength. It will bring about a morality that will save people from disaster in one form or another. We look at our country today, and in a way it's been influenced by an agnostic secularism, an agnostic socialism. Now, not all socialism is like this agnostic one. It can be traced back to the 19th century, to Ludwig Feuerbach, Karl Marx, Friedrich Nietzsche. All were atheists. And some of this atheism comes forth in an agnostic secularism. And this agnostic secularism, in a way, in our country has forced God, the name of God, out of the public forum. And in our society today, there's almost a bias by some against the belief in God or the expression of God. And it's having its results in the destruction, in a way, of our inner cities, of the political life of many of our politicians. It is devastating at times. Now, one of the leading promoters of this agnostic secularism was a man born in 1909 called Saul Alinsky. Born in Chicago to Orthodox Jewish parents. However, by the time that he entered the University of Chicago, he was an agnostic. And he was also influenced by such people as Al Capone and Al Capone's successor, Frank Nitti. He also favored, during the Spanish Civil War, the communists there. He never claimed to be a communist. He did admit he was a socialist of one kind or another. Now, he had worked with the Archdiocese, Catholic Archdiocese of Chicago. They both wanted to help out the poor. And he did work with the poor. However, he had an unusual way of going about it. He felt that he could use immoral means to achieve his objectives of deception, of lies, and so forth. Even he used what they call double speak. He would say things in a moral language. However, it was to in a way, deceive people into using immoral means to achieve what he wanted to be achieved. And he wrote a book called The Radicals, or The Rule of Radicals, in 1970. In that book, he talked about the first great radical was Lucifer himself. Also, he credited Niccolo Machiavelli with his way of trying to help out the poor. Now, the difference between Machiavelli and Alinsky was that Machiavelli said you can tell lies to keep those in power in their prominence. However, Alinsky said you use the immoral means to keep or to change society, to allow the poor to develop. And Alinsky became known as the great father of community organizing. And unfortunately, the Catholic Church and he worked together to help out the poor. In the way they did accomplish things for the poor. But as Alinsky said, all is warfare, not welfare, all is warfare. And he created a class conflict to achieve his means. And he was very successful. To some extent, he is credited with bringing about a lot of change, but unfortunately by immoral means. And we wonder about our politicians today. Too many of them double speak. They say one thing, but in a way they mean something else. And as the question is faith in a loving God that will bring our country back. George Washington said that without religion, a person can be moral, but without religion, a whole nation cannot be moral. The nation needs religion to maintain a public morality, a citizenship of virtue, that it diminishes as a agnosticism or an atheism begins to prevail. Now, we do not have an atheism or agnosticism here, except perhaps in the public square, where publicly we cannot speak about it. So the question is, how do we restore the great faith in a loving God? Faith is not something below reason. That is superstition. Faith is something above reason. Faith lifts us up beyond the ordinary to bring us in line with God. If people would only love God and love their neighbor, that creates a high morality, a morality that we desperately need in our country today. There's a line in Matthew 15 about beware of a ferocious wolf clothed in sheep's clothing. And it's interesting to know that back in the 1880s, when the Fabian Society was established, its motto at the time was a voracious wolf about to devour democratic capitalism. And today we can see that a wolf clothed in sheep's clothing is presented to people. It sounds wonderful, but in reality, it's double speak. There's immoral means behind it. You can use all the deception you want in the world, all the things that aren't true, to get across your point. So we need to pray for our country that it will go back to its original foundation, when religion, all religion that is true religion and authentic, believing in a loving God and loving your neighbor, it was built upon that, and that's where justice prevails. So let us in our prayers ask our Heavenly Father, as the prophet Habakkuk said, that faith in a loving God will save Israel and will save our country today.